In the South Dakota Army National Guard, he deployed with the 740th Transportation Company to Iraq years back and is now in the 147th Army Band with me. And he and his wife and 3 children will be moving to Pierre in June. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
My sympathies. I have to deal with him once a month. You guys have to deal with him once a week. No. I want to thank you and thank the Rotary for having me today. I really appreciate it. This job is something I'm excited for, a little bit nervous for, but we're really looking forward to getting out to Pierre. It's been a crazy couple of months. It's kind of slowing down here a little bit now, but I'll be starting out there July 1st, and as he said, we'll be moving out to Pierre in the middle of June, and really looking forward to it. I kind of hear a lot of kind of conciliatory notes when I tell people I'm moving to Pierre, but we are really looking forward to it. We've got 3 kids, twins that are 6 and a 10-year-old son, and they're all pretty okay with the move. They're excited because there's a pizza ranch there, and I guess that's what it takes to keep them happy. So, I don't have any prepared slides or anything. What I thought I would do is just tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about my leadership and what the member schools can expect from me as the director of the Activities Association, and then open it up for any questions that you might have for me. I know I'm learning quickly that everyone has an opinion when it comes to sports in our state, but that's a good thing. So in terms of myself, I grew up in Volga, graduated from Sioux Valley High School, and when you grow up around Brookings, you don't really have a choice, so I've kind of been, it's not going to be popular, but I've kind of grown up as a jackrabbit, and I had 2 brothers that played football for SDSU. But like Dr. Shorn said, I did end up getting my degree from here, so I owe a lot of my professional career and what I've done the last several years to USD and to the degree that I got here. In high school, I was very much involved in athletics and in the arts, football and wrestling and track and golf and baseball, and then in band and choir. And from there, I went on to Dakota State University to major in elementary and special education. And after a couple years there, I decided to join the National Guard, the 740th Transportation Company, which was out of Brookings at the time. And my job there was as a truck driver. And we drove 915s, which are essentially semi-trucks. And that all went well until my last semester of undergrad, started student teaching, and then we got into a war. And right at the beginning of the war, we were deployed and ended up in Iraq and Kuwait we were deployed for around 18 months. We were in country for 15 to 16 months. Our company drove, I think, just over 3 million miles as a truck company, and I ended up driving about 50,000 miles of that myself. So we saw just about every square inch of both of those countries, and I'd prefer not to see another square inch of either of those countries, but came back and finished, and then was hired at Brookings to be a special education teacher there in a self-contained behavior classroom. And while at Brookings, I was also able to coach football and wrestling for Brookings, and then decided to switch to the Army Band and got my master's degree from South Dakota State. And from there, I went up to Big Stone City. If you don't know where that is, it's a little town right on the border, the Minnesota border, just east of Millbank. Very small school, so I was there for 4 years and was a superintendent and principal, and I was a business manager for a while. I drove bus, so I was a substitute teacher. Just about everything there. So I did that for 4 years, and during that time I got my doctorate from here in Vermilion, and then was hired at McCook Central in Salem, and I've been there for the last 5 years as the superintendent and special education director. And so it's been 5 years, and I've been very involved in the sports and the fine arts programs at our school. And this last fall, I was able to be an official coach for the football program. This last fall, we were looking for coaches and couldn't find anyone, so they were stuck with me. And But that was kind of when I decided to apply for this job. It really had brought it back to me how important our activities are, both sports and the fine arts, to our students, and how important it is the relationships that they develop with their teammates and with their coaches, and the lessons that they learn in life when it comes to sportsmanship and wellness and working together with other people. So after the season, the deadline for the job was coming open, and I decided to give it a shot, and was honored to be given a chance to interview, and then was very humbled to be selected as the next executive director of our association. And it was kind of a whirlwind couple days after I accepted the job, a lot of media calling and things like that, but it's been a very humbling experience so far, and I look forward to starting there and continuing on the great things that have been going on there. In terms of what our member schools can expect from me, it's kind of a cliche thing, but I kind of pride myself in servant leadership, and I really value humility and genuineness in leadership, and the impact of building relationships with people that you work with. So I think our member schools can expect from me as a person leading the association, someone who's going to listen, someone who's going to be visible around the state, and someone who's going to make a very strong effort to connect with and develop relationships with our high school principals, our athletic directors, our superintendents, our boards of education, and then hopefully do some things to connect with some of the kids in our state. I became a superintendent at 27 years old, and this is my 9th year as a superintendent, and I've loved the job. And the thing I'll miss most about it is the chance that you get to build relationships with kids. And so I hope that I'm going to miss that a lot, and I hope that that's something that I'm going to be able to do as executive director in a different capacity. But I feel good that I'm able to do something that will benefit all the kids in our state. So in terms of leadership and what our schools can expect, that's what they can expect from me. I'm someone who, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I'm not a big power guy. I'm okay saying I don't know when asked a question. And I think what I rely on in leadership is the ability to build relationships with people, and to remember where I came from, and to stay humble, and to be myself and be genuine with people. I'm not a politician, and I'm not a salesman. And if there's any politicians in here, I'm not saying that as a slight, but I know who I am, and I'm comfortable with who I am, and I always try to be as genuine as I can with people, and that's served me very well as a leader so far, and I'll continue to do that with the association. So with that, I would open it up to questions that anyone would have for me in regards to the association and issues that you have. Yes, sir.
Do children who are being homeschooled or at other private schools have access to the curricular activities in the school district?
That's a district by district decision. There's some districts that say no. There's some districts that require them to attend one class or two classes there. Right now that's every district has their own policy in regards to that. I know there was talk this last legislative session about kind of making a uniform policy on that, but for right now, that's what the association goes on, is whatever the local district's policy is. Yes, sir.
Where do you see the small school consolidation?
That's a tough thing. In our state, it's kind of interesting. I suppose it's not much different than a handful of other states, but in our state we've got a dozen or so school districts that are really booming and growing fast. The Sioux Falls is down here, Yankton and Vermilion, Brookings, kind of the I-29 corridor, and then Rapid City, Spearfish, those type areas. And we've got a lot of districts who are really dropping kids off losing kids very quickly. And then we've got a large majority of our districts in the middle who are kind of just stable where they're at. And that discussion and where we see those going is something that I'm going to have to learn kind of as I go. But I see a lot of that being shaped by the state and the funding formula. To be honest with you, I think it depends on how this new funding formula works out for small schools and how many of them small schools are forced to consolidate with each other. I think the association has done a good job of welcoming sports cooperatives. McCook Central is part of one. We're with Montrose, so it's the McCook Central Montrose Sports Cooperative. They have their own district, they have their own school board, and we meet a couple times a year. And I think that a large majority of the sports cooperatives in our state are very successful, and they have the best interests of the kids at heart. And there's always some outliers with that, and there's always ones that don't work. And what I found is the only problems that we've had in our sports cooperative has been with the adults. It's been with the kids, it's been with the adults, and the kids get along great. They're like their best friends, and the adults kind of get in the way of that sometimes for whatever reason. But I think the association, in looking down the road, I think the association will continue to provide opportunities and be welcoming to sports cooperatives moving forward, and encourage schools to do that so they can continue offering activities to their students that they wouldn't otherwise be able to offer. Yes, sir.
What would be the greatest challenge in terms of athletics in the near future that you're going to have to face?
Well, in terms of athletics, I think it kind of goes along with the small school question in that we're going to have to take a hard look at our classifications and how we do that. We have, take football, for example. I think there's 137 football programs in our state. And the disparity in enrollment is enormous within those 137 schools. You have Sioux Falls down to the Leola Fredericks of the world, things like that. So trying to make sure the classification systems are fair to the athletes, but that they still offer a high degree of competitiveness within the sport. You take football for an example. I know there's been talk about six-man football for some of the rural school districts. Faith is the one that's brought it up, and for them to co-op with somebody, I think they'd have to go to Dupree, and that's 40-some miles one way. So a lot of times the co-ops aren't feasible, and they don't have another school that they can just easily join with. So I think the biggest challenge with athletics is trying to find that balance within classifications to keep it so that there's a high degree of competitiveness, but that it's also safe and that it's fair for the kids. Yes, sir. Whoops.
I wonder what your thoughts are on the issue of head injuries in high school football.
I think it's serious, and not just in you see it going all the way up to the NFL now. I think it's a big concern. I know the association just finished a study involving quite a few medical personnel, and they just put in some new contact rules and I know that they've adopted them for football and for soccer. But when it comes to how they start the season and throughout the season, and limiting some contact in practice, and limiting they kind of combine heat injuries and concussions together. So they've just approved quite a few procedural things that schools have to follow that I think they're aiming to cut down on the number of concussions. They're really trying to make coaches think a lot and really plan a lot in regards to the amount of contact that they have within practice. Now, getting the football coaches to buy into that and to actually follow it is another story. Yes?
I was going to actually do a follow-up question. Do you think that could hurt our students' abilities to apply for scholarships at in football programs as we tweak our rules? Does it make our students less competitive?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's something we'll have to see, but I don't see that as something right now that would impact that. I know there are a lot of other states that have the same type of restrictions. To be honest, there's a lot more restrictions, I believe, in college football than there are in high school football in terms of contact, and then within the pros as well. I think, if nothing else, it's going to keep our kids healthier and keep them on the field more and give them more of an opportunity to showcase their skills to college programs. That would be the hope. Yes, sir.
Thoughts on basketball championships rotating? There are, I believe, 1 or 2 cities who feel that they should have it every year, maybe for all classes, I don't know. And,
Yeah.
we have a pattern of rotating other ones around. Your thoughts on that? Where the more events going?
Well, that's one thing that everyone seems to have an opinion on, that I'm finding out pretty quickly. The association has a site selection committee that they put together that looks at all those type of things, and I think they've done a good job. I know, there's been editorials in the Argus Leader saying that, they should all be in, the AA should always be in Sioux Falls. And I think that it's healthy to keep rotating them. Historically, it's been Sioux Falls and Rapid City, and then Aberdeen has had the Bees for quite a while. I think you'll see that continue for the future. The hope would be that it kind of drives competition within the arenas that we play in, so that they continue to update their arenas and keep them current. But I think that there's value in playing them around the state. And then for the other sports that aren't football and basketball, I think there's also value in allowing some of the smaller, not smaller towns, but smaller than kind of the ESD level towns, the Yankton, Vermilion, Mitchell, Watertown, Brookings, to be able to host some of those events as well. It's big for their local economies. I don't think it's our job to drive local economies, but if they can provide a good experience for our kids, and it's something where we can help the town out, I think it's something worth looking at. Brookings comes up a lot with basketball, because it gives the kids a chance to play in Frost Arena. I know football will likely always be here in Vermilion, and the kids are always excited to play in the Dome. But that's something that I'm going to have to learn a lot more about, to be honest with you, before I have a hard take on it. On the surface of it, I would say that I think the direction that the site selection committee has us going is a positive direction, and that they're continuing to rotate them around. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea about what percentage of our schools still offer competitive debate and oral interpretation?
I could not tell you that off the top of my head. I know you see it a lot more in the larger schools, the AA and A type schools, than you do in the B schools. But I think it's still a fairly good competition when they have the state oral interp and state debate competitions. I think there's still quite a few programs. It's probably not as big as it once was, but the AA schools have been very good at promoting that, and they've got some great kids that do it. And you see it also in some of the A schools. Where it kind of drops off is as you get smaller in schools. As you get to the smaller schools, they have a harder time just staffing all those positions. And the kids, speaking as someone from a smaller school, the kids are involved in so many things that at some point they have to kind of stop, or they're never home. So I think it's strong in the A's, and then probably in the upper half of the AA's in the upper half of the A enrollments, and then you kind of see it drop off a little bit. Yes, sir.
And to preface this, not only can Dan drive a truck, he's also a very good trumpet player and low brass musician. So he's somebody who, he's spoken a lot about the athletic part, but he also understands and appreciates the arts part. What challenges are South Dakota schools going to be confronting, and the South Dakota High School Activities Association, in the area of fine arts? And as we talk about funding formulas and enrollments, what do you see some of the challenges there for the schools as well?
Sure, excellent point. I think he's correct. Fine arts have been a big part of my life, and I think that's, one of the reasons why I was appealing to the association is my background in athletics and in the arts, and then having a background as a superintendent as well, to bring some experience with financial matters and legislative issues and things like that. But in terms of schools and the fine arts, I think it has seemed to be that fine arts are cut more disproportionately than you would see in athletic programs other things. So as an association, where that impacts us, I think we'll always have strong numbers in terms of all-state band and all-state choir, but sort of those ancillary ones where you have all-state orchestra, all-state jazz band, show choir, things like that. Those are a lot of the programs that you see fewer of, again, with the smaller schools, because they don't have the funds to pay the teacher to do that extra period of jazz band or do that extra period of show choir. So you see those programs dropping off a little bit. In orchestra, there's very few A or B schools that have orchestra programs. That I could see that continuing into the future as well. But I would agree with you in that with the school funding and particularly if there are cuts or if there's a lack of funding, the arts tend to be the first ones to go, and that would directly impact the programs that the association puts on. Yes, sir.
In high school football, the goalposts are 4 feet 10 inches wider than college.
Okay.
An association, the Fitness Association, has never required the dome to have adjustable goalposts.
Ah, I was not aware of that. Yeah.
So it's not a real regulation.
Okay, so they're kicking at college field at goalposts instead of high school ones. Huh.
And they could have adjustable goalposts.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. I'll look into that. That's an interesting thing. Yeah. Other questions? I'll say, the two questions I get asked the most often are, what do you see as the biggest challenges? And someone asked me that in terms of athletics. And then they ask if it's intimidating to be following Wayne Carney. And so the first one to that, in terms of the challenges that I see moving ahead, of course, the classification things that I talked about. The other thing that you might hear about or start hearing about in the news, or maybe you have already, would be the process that the association is going to have to go through to sort of delineate between the Activities Association and the association's foundation when it comes to sponsorships and donations. Right now, there's a South Dakota High School Activities Association Foundation. They have their own board. I'll be a member of that as a director, but I'm not in charge of that at all. And then there's the association itself. And the association itself has 5 corporate sponsors. It's Billion, Sanford Health, First Premier, the South Dakota Guard, and Farmers Union. And Billion, their donations, their corporate sponsorships are in kind. They donate vehicles to the association for the employees to drive. But the other 4, they donate, between the 4 of them, it's around $300,000 a year. And right now, all 4 of them have indicated that they'd like their donations to go to the foundation, which is all well and great, but right now they're kind of melded together, and there's nothing in place that shows, that kind of separates the two out and spells out this is what you receive as sort of perks as being a foundation donor as opposed to a corporate sponsor of the association. So that's one of the things we have to figure out. And then, of course, if that $300,000 goes over to the foundation, that's $300,000 that the association uses to help put on good state tournaments, to help pay for the daily operations of the association. So if they move their funding over to the foundation, then we've got to find a way to plug that gap, which means finding new sponsors or sending bills to the schools. And that's hard to do right now with, especially this year with a 0.3% increase. It's hard to send a bill to the schools for something that's been funded for quite some time. So that'll be one of the first challenges that I'll have to face when I start working there in July. But I'm confident that we're going to be able to figure it out and find a way to fund that without sending a bill to the schools. And but it's going to take some work to do it. So that's aside from the classifications. That's one of the bigger challenges that I'd foresee. And then the second question is, I don't know how many of you know Wayne Carney in here, but he's been there for a long time. And I get a lot of questions, what's it like going in and replacing Wayne? And is that intimidating? And that's kind of a complicated question to answer. Yes, of course it's intimidating following someone like Wayne who's been there for a long time and that who's so well known in the state. And Wayne's, but on the other hand, Wayne has done a lot of great things for the association, and he's leaving a good legacy behind him. So I feel, yes, it's sort of intimidating, but in the same aspect, I feel fortunate to be stepping into that position because he's leaving it in a really great place. And Wayne has been nothing but gracious since I was announced as the next director, and I know he'll be there to answer questions that I have and to give me advice. So I'm thankful for Wayne and what he's done for the association, and he's done a lot of great things. So once again, I want to thank you for having me. I appreciate the time, and I'd love to come back sometime in the future when I can hopefully answer your questions a little bit better. Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. Yep.
I have one question. I have seen the South Dakota All-State Band, the All-State Choir, and the All-State Orchestra on several occasions, and have been extremely impressed with the quality of performances that they produce year to year to year. Does the association intend to continue supporting those kind of concerts?
Absolutely, yes. Right now, kind of the structure of the association, there's a board of directors or a board of controllers, and that's made up of school board members, athletic directors, principals, superintendents, and then I'm below that board of directors, and then there are three assistant directors, and so there's one for boys sports, that's John Krogstrand. There's one for the girls sports, that's Joe Auk, and then we have an assistant director for the fine arts. So Brooks Bowman is his name, and he's in charge of the All-State Band, choir, orchestra, jazz band, show choir, journalism, one act, drama, all those things. So yes, I mean, there's a dedicated staff person in place who holds the same rank, I guess, for lack of a better word, as the people who run the boys and the girls sports as well. Yes. And I would add, last thing I promise, then I'll get off here. I've had some people nervous because I'm not a basketball guy. I grew up around wrestling. My family is a wrestling family. I've grown up around wrestling. I've coached wrestling. And there are people nervous because I would guess that most of the other directors that we've had have been basketball people. And I guess, with that, I would say, I know Wayne has been pretty active within the basketball circle, and basketball is something I'm going to have to learn. I know the basics of basketball, but it's something that I'm going to have to learn a lot more about in terms of rules and to get myself out there a lot more with basketball. But what I can see now is John Krogstrand getting more involved in basketball where Wayne was until I get my feet under me with basketball. And I would help out with some of the stuff that John was doing, that he has been doing in terms of wrestling. So it's just a little bit different. Those guys that came in who were basketball guys probably didn't have much wrestling experience. So it kind of works both ways. But I feel comfortable working with basketball, and I think it's going to be just fine. So if you have people come to you and they're nervous because I'm not a basketball guy, reassure them it's going to be okay. So.
I think we should just tell them you're getting rid of basketball.
Yeah, I'm going to cut it. No, Lord, no. I want to try to make it to July 1st. So.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes, thank you very much.